as a child, there were 45 strewn all over my grandmother's house. Well, Sundays was Grandma's day. So we'd go over, whole family, 8 aunts and uncles. So it was a packed house. So my job as a 4 and 5-year-old was to play the music. Well, really what it was to like look through all the crap of records that they have that no one could figure out. And they said, Hex, play Baby Love by Diana Ross. And at 4 or 5, I knew exactly what label it was, what color it looked like, put it on the record player, and that was my job as a kid, and I loved it. Washington Heights, that's where it all began. To me, it's the last true melting pot neighborhood of New York City. It's where you had Latinos, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, mixing with the Irish, with the Jews, the Italians, and everyone getting along and everyone loving each other and everyone influencing each other in their own kind of unique ways. And that's pretty much where I'm from. I was born in the 60s, raised in the 70s. Best time of the world, man. The economy was in the shitter, but man, was there such great art and something about adversity that creates really something special. Hex is actually my childhood nickname. This is where I joined Hex and Hector and became my professional name. Everyone called me Little Hex. My folks were what you would consider fun parents. My apartment in particular was the house. Everyone in my neighborhood knew my mom. My mom was like everyone's mom. They all came to my house because the music was always on, the food was always on the table. It was just something going on. My dad was the coolest guy in the neighborhood, man. He was an OG. He was like old school Cuban. We had a thing in our neighborhood called bolita. Bolita was basically gambling in the hood, you know, for people who live in the neighborhood. So it's basically numbers runnings is what it's formerly known as. But my dad was just security. He watched over, you know, all the numbers coming in and out and made sure everything was copacetic. And it was fine. There was never any issues. My mom, you know, typical Puerto Rican housewife, man. Cooked her ass off, spanked us when we were bad. But you know what? Gave us the best time of our lives, man. There were no restrictions, man. I mean, we weren't bad kids, so there's not much to manage, but. My brother was a breakdancer. He was a graffiti artist, and like any other kid growing up in the Heights, you know, it's what we did. We played in the streets, we broke dance, and we, you know, did some graffiti. Well, they did. I was never any of that. I was more interested in the music. I was more interested in being behind the scenes. I wanted no part of breakdancing, no part of graffiti writing. But that's the time that I grew up in. But my brother was part of this little breaking crew, and funny story. So one day, it's dinner time. I'm going to get my brother. He's in the subway station, breaking, battling, whatever, doing what he does. Maybe about 10 kids there. Police had no idea what this was, what was going on. They thought we were fighting. Now you're talking about September, maybe October 1980. They arrested us all, thinking that, you know, they just they caught a huge gang fight. But once we were questioned at the police station, they realized, okay, these kids were dancing. Someone had the wherewithal to like come by, photograph what was going on. And at that moment, the first photo of breakdancing was recorded, and it's documented at that very time that I went to get my brother. When I started back in 1979, I was actually a hip hop DJ. And this is before hip hop records, obviously. So you had 2 copies of everything, running break beats, you got a live MC behind you. And I was doing that for maybe the first year, from 79 to about I'd say about like, I started about September 79, went into about June of 80 is when I started getting into the dance stuff. We had a little crew, right? Bunch of us, right? There was 5 of us, all short guys. Had sweatshirts made, said LMC, which stood for the Little Man Crew, right? Because we were all a bunch of littles. Back then it was all gang, you know, everything was colors. So you had these colors. But for us, it was like a DJ gang. We were like the first sort of like DJ crew. Everything else was like, you know, street turf violent gangs, you know, the Young Lords, the Ball Busters. I mean, this is what we were copying, but we used it as a DJ group. So that's how it all started for me, you know, just a bunch of guys getting together. One guy had a turntable, another guy had a mixer, I had an amp, a couple of guys had the speakers, we all put it together, and boom, the Little Man Crew was born. The parties were called Riverside. They were basically in Riverside Park. You had to actually cross a highway to get to the party. It was what they would call outlaw parties, but at the time we just called them Riverside Jam. So we drive through the park with a car full of equipment, set up on a terrace. We'd break into the women's bathroom, unscrew the light bulb, screw in a power source, and that's how we got the power.
DJ.
So the transition from hip hop into the Paradise Garage, or what you call underground disco, came from the time where I first went to the Paradise Garage. This happened maybe like late 1980, maybe early 1981. My buddy Todd Grosson was a member there, and he said, Hex, you gotta come down and check out this club. He knew I was into music. Back then, you know, the age restrictions weren't so bad, so I think I was like 16 at the time. And so he takes me to the garage. The first time I get there, I see this ramp. It's like a huge parking lot ramp, which, I mean, it's actually a garage. It wasn't like some clever name. It was actually a parking garage for Bell Telephone. But walking up that ramp, you can hear the bass in the background, that whoop, whoop, whoop. And I was like, holy crap, what is this? Hairs on my hands stand up. I was like, oh my God, I just couldn't wait to get in there. When I walked in and I heard this music, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it's the first time I heard like soulful, uplifting dance music on a huge sound system. And right then and there, I decided, you know what? Hip hop is done. This is my calling. And from then on, I became, you know, a disciple of Larry Levan. I was one of the first guys to actually take that sound and bring it up to the Heights and play it for these young kids in Washington Heights. And to this day, I keep hearing like, oh, Hex, you know, someone would hit me up on Facebook, says, you know, brother, you were like the soundtrack for my life. You defined the 80s for me. And like, when I hear stuff like that, it's just like, I mean, you know, what better way, you know, to feel like gratitude for what you've done all these years. You know, forget the Grammys, forget all the remixing. Just to hear from like people like that, people I grew up with, to say that I had an effect on their lives, I mean, I could just quit right now. So the transition from Lisa to some of the bigger artists that I work with is what I would call, I mean, night and day, you know? That first remix was crap. I was surprised they actually released it. What I did appreciate about that first experience was that I learned how to record the old way, which is in a proper studio with an SSL board, analog, right to tape. So it really helped me with my, you know, my arranging skills and my attention to detail and chords and stuff like that, because you're working with a live musician who are, you know, which I've always done, but when you do it to tape, it's got to be done like this, you know? It's like, you don't really have time to mess around with 2 or 3 takes. It's got to happen quickly. So that sort of nightmare first few sessions with SSL into digital, like I said, it was the real foundation to what I think my sound was, which is like a big sort of musical, sort of like involved, huge production kind of deal. Once I became comfortable in my own skin, you know, it was more the digital thing, more the digital performer, which was the first, you know, digital sequencer that I worked with. And it became easier because when I made that transition to work with bigger artists, it was just me and my partner at the time, Matt Quayle. A lot less intimidating, not many engineers, just him and I, vibing in the studios and making these records that we did. So although it was like a tough go at first, I'm appreciative of it because it really sort of like showed me the way to record properly. The jump from Lisa to what would become, you know, the big artists I'd work with in the future was sort of like a lucky thing, because I did a remix for Jelly Bean, small label at the time. It's a song called The Lover That You Are. The artist was Pulse. It was something I worked with these guys, Bobby Guy and Ernie Lake. You know those guys, Soul Solution, you know, nice guys. A couple of guys I met at the China Club, and you know, they were producers and musicians, and we kind of got together. And Jelly Bean sort of like came at me with this project, and we did it. Turned out to be this huge sort of like underground gay anthem. Frankie Knuckles, believe it or not, was one of the first people to play it at Twilo. And it's really not a typical Frankie record at all. It's more of a junior record. But like that record got the attention of Hosh Gorelli, who was A&R over at Arista. And he called and said, so you guys did this Love That You Are. How'd you like to do Tony Braxton's next single, Unbreak My Heart? I was like, no way. Fuck out of here. There's no way this is happening. Thought it was some kind of joke, maybe a prank, but no, it's a real deal. We got Unbreak My Heart, and it sort of like became, it was the launching pad for my career. There's like that one record. And I mean, to this day, I'm just floored that it even happened at all. Because here we go from like the small record over at Jelly Bean to Clive Davis and Arista. I was like, I mean, really? Whoa. But yeah, that's how it happened. And the record got traction. It was actually one of the first dance remixes to ever premiere at the Grammys as a remix, you know, like not using the original. So we're all pretty proud of that. And once that record dropped, it was off to the races. The other big names who I've worked with, Jennifer Lopez, Sting, Whitney Houston, Deborah Cox, Janet Jackson, Babyface, Madonna maybe one or two. So about the Grammy, when I was first nominated, that was actually the year that I went. I took my mom, we did the whole red carpet thing. It was just a surreal experience. So the year was 2000. Right? It was the year I was nominated, and I didn't actually win, but the experience and showing my mom where I'd come from, who just like let me be the guy that I was, never told me to turn the music down, just for me to have to give her that experience and to show her how far this has come along, that's another like one of those life-affirming moments that, you know, you just can't believe that's actually happened. At the time, that was when the dance remix category had first started. So it was more for a body of work, right? It was for 6 pieces of music. But usually they single out one. That year I didn't win, so I don't remember what it was. But the following year I was nominated again, and I didn't go. I was like, you know what? I did this already. No need for me to be there again. So, you know, whatever. So I'm watching the Grammys on the television home, and I get a call while the remix of the year announcers are announced, and it's from Peter Hofer, who had won the year before, who's a dear friend of mine. So I get the call, and I pick up the phone. He's like, "Bitch, you took my Grammy," in his like German drawl. I was like, "What?" He said, "You won the fucking Grammy," and he hangs up on me. He was convinced he was going to be the first, you know, back-to-back winner. So that's how I found out, was Peter Hofer on the phone. So the state of dance music now compared to what it was back in the 80s is, again, there's just no comparison. I mean, back in those days, if I showed you a playlist of some of the stuff I played, it's like every record is a classic. Every song that I played back there, you can play now, and it would still get a dance floor rolling. Nowadays, I kid you not, I'm a still working DJ, and I'm still like out there busting my hump playing music. And when I go record shopping on some of these dance sites, I'll be honest with you, it would take me maybe 2-3 hours to find, I don't know, 3 or 4 good tunes. There is so much crap out there. That's the art of it now. You gotta like weed through all the junk to find the gems. Whereas back in the day, you know, you just knew what the gems were. You just went and got them. And to me, that's the biggest sort of like difference between now and then. It's like back then you had to figure out, oh my God, what am I gonna play tonight? I've got so much. Now it's like, God, I mean, really? 2 hours and all I got is like 4 tracks? So that to me is probably the most marked difference between then and now. I mean, I've done 14-hour sets, stereo Montreal. I've done after-hour sets that go on for 10 plus hours. For me, that's just the way to do it, you know, because I like telling a story, you know, beginning, middle, and end. The whole hour-and-a-half set, I'm not about it. I can't do it. I can't. I just need time. It takes me an hour and a half just to warm up. You know what I mean? Nowadays, you just gotta go for the jugular, and I can't. I'm not that DJ. Where have I spun? My favorite in the world has to be Tokyo, Japan. They've got a love of dance music that compares to none. I mean, they would show up with records that I've done years ago, white label promos. I'm like, I don't want that, give me that, just for me to sign it. But yeah, I mean, Tokyo, London's amazing, Australia, you know, France was wonderful. I used to play at a club called Queen. Like the door person was like this big porn star, and it was wild. Oh, my favorite DJs then and now. I mean, obviously, Larry Levan had a huge influence on me. But before him, there was a DJ called Charlie Chase, who was like, you know, one of the four founders of hip hop. DJ Hollywood, I used to listen to his mixtapes back in the day. Currently, you know, I love Osulande, Danny Krivit, Louis Vega's an all-time favorite, you know, so I have a love and appreciation for all kinds of music and all kinds of DJs. Apart from the Grammy, I think probably one of my greatest moments as a DJ and a music guy was when I was able to return to Washington Heights and play for the people that I played for 30 plus years ago. These were the parties that these kids came back 35 years later and told me that that was the soundtrack of their lives. So I was able to go back to the same locations 35 years later. Completely illegal, cops were there and everything. They saw what was going on. They stood back and waited for the party to end to tell us, well, you know what? I see these are all adults, but my captain's here, we gotta give you a ticket. So, you know, gave us a ticket for $5. But like going back to the place where I started and seeing the look on these people's faces and I actually played the music that I played back then, you know, all the garage stuff. It was, I mean, it was probably the first time that I ever cried, you know, wept publicly at a gig. It was just sort of like it was so cathartic. It was just so like, it just made me feel like, wow, man, I did this for these people all these years later. And there were tears on the dance floor. It was just, yeah, I mean, that to me, it's gotta be the greatest moment in my musical career, without a doubt.